Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Cash That. This is your host, Joe Delara. We've got a nice bonus episode of the Cash That podcast for you. And we're going to still have our regularly scheduled episode that drops on Wednesday with a very special guest. I'm going to leave that tease for you guys, but we will get into that later. This episode is once again brought to you by our good friends at props.cash. Props.cash, absolutely the best in the business. You've got those red charts, those green charts, the hit rates. We've got you for NBA. You can sort for the playoffs versus the regular season. We've got WNBA, which is rolling. So now you can start actually seeing those Caitlin Clark props in the app, whether it's on the desktop or on your phone. And you've obviously got MLB and the NHL. And you can get that all for 25% off your first month with code DELARA25. But look, we've got a very special guest in because I needed to bring in some backup. Look, I got the kid here. We've got baby Luka. We got Luka's locks, but at the same time, there's only like I needed a little bit of extra oomph. We've got Brandon Anderson in here with you guys because this is big. We need to talk about the conference finals. Brandon and I have a ton of thoughts about this. It's a pleasure to have you on. I'm sure the listeners are happy, and I'm always happy to chop it up about the NBA with you, Brandon. How you doing?
I'm doing well. It's always good to put our never-ending text thread into audio format and let the people in. Let them eavesdrop on what we are talking about all day, every day, anyway. So I'm
Yeah.
excited. I have not had in 20 years this level of excitement for a Final Four in the NBA with my Minnesota Timberwolves, who I did not really think were going to be here. But
Yeah.
they're more your Timberwolves with your tickets and your futures you've had on them. So I'm excited. I'm excited to watch some basketball. The West, especially, looks very entertaining. I'm excited to get into it with you.
No, it's going to be a like a big amount of fun here, a big podcast for all of you guys. I mean, for you guys that don't know, Brandon is a beleaguered Minnesota Timberwolves fan here. And, obviously you guys know that we have the big tickets, the big futures tickets on the Minnesota Timberwolves, but this is very exciting for Brandon. Obviously, I wish my Knicks were in the conference finals as well, but, here we are. So what I want to do is we're going to start talking about the Eastern Conference Finals first. Then we'll talk about the Western Conference Finals. This episode is going to be dropping into your ear holes on Tuesday morning, like overnight, probably between Monday, Tuesday morning. So that way you guys can get our best bets for the series for the East. And then we'll go into the West a little bit, just based on, like that's the way the schedule is. So that's the way it shakes out. So obviously the Boston Celtics just smoked the Cleveland Cavaliers. I mean, it was not really a surprise. Brandon still has yet to watch a Eastern Conference playoff game that involves the Boston Celtics. He just has nothing to watch. And then the Indiana Pacers really put up a great performance against the New York Knicks hospital squad, and it just is what it is. So I'm a little bit disappointed, but at the same time, Jalen Brunson broke his hand. We were not going to put any type of fight against the Boston Celtics with a broken hand from Jalen Brunson. He's just not going to play. So when we look at this series in the Eastern Conference, Celtics were the favorite to win the NBA title going into the season. The Indiana Pacers were 250 to 1, Brandon. And that how that they were such a far long shot, they didn't even hit your futures portfolio. What do you when you look at this series, do you think that Indiana has like a puncher's chance here, given the fact the offense is so good? Or is it just kind of like Boston's got a cakewalk to the title match?
Yeah, I fear that it's the latter. it's I am. It's funny when Matt Moore and I did the very first forward-looking basketball podcast at Buckets after the title last year, and we did our first. Okay, win totals have just come out. Like, okay, we have free agency. We got the names. Who are we looking at? The team that I was in on with my 3-unit like lock of the season was Pacers over, baby.
Yep,
Like this
same.
was the one. This was the team. Like you and I talked about it. We were all on Halliburton last year. That's your dude. And it's so funny to me. Like in my notes from before the season, in my notes from before the playoffs, even from a month ago, I have a note about like Pacers conference finals. I could see that. Like that actually works for me. I could see the path for it. And then here I am, Pacers doing better than I even imagined that they could be with zero stock in Pacers to cash. Like I cashed my over. Hooray. and
That's
that's
it.
it. Now they actually took some of my cash back because I bet on the Knicks last round. So yeah, the Pacers somehow turned out even better than I imagined that they would be allowed to be. But I think for me, here's the question: I have to. Not, I'm not putting an asterisk on the Pacers. You can only beat the teams that are in front of you. But as a betting analyst, it is our job to decide, okay, what does that tell us about now the next matchup? And here's where I struggle with the Pacers is I find their results so far very underwhelming and very unconvincing.
Yeah.
I feel like the Bucks get no Giannis. They get awesome Dame for a couple games and kind of surprisingly hang around for. I picked Pacers heavily in that one,
Yeah. Same.
and then the Bucks come out, very strong, and then well, Dame is out, and then even then they still kind of like barely get over the line. It felt like, and now it sort of feels like we had a redux of that with the Knicks, where it's like, okay, I picked Knicks in 5 or 6. I would pick that again every single time.
Yeah.
It's just your entire team, Joe, ended up in the
It just
hospital,
exploded.
and so
Exploded.
it didn't go there. Yeah, and like credit where it's due, they blew the doors off in Game 7 on the road. That's always impressive. But like, so here's the lineup. If you take dudes who were healthy enough to finish a series from Milwaukee and New York together, here's the lineup of the combined lineup who the Pacers just beat to get here. Starting backcourt is Patrick Beverley and Dante DiVincenzo. Chris
Fair.
Middleton, that's your superstar. And then your big man rotation, it's Bobby and Brooke and Hartenstein. I don't know who's starting. I don't really care, but it's those
Yeah.
three. You got Deuce off the bench. You got Malik Beasley. That's it. That's the team. That's like a
What about
30-win
Alec
team.
Burks, dude? What about Alec Burks?
Fine. Alec Burks is the 10th man who can come in and play 40 minutes and knock down 5 threes off the bench in the playoffs. Like, but they're not going to make the playoffs. They're not in there. Like
No.
here, accordingly, here's the roster that they didn't beat at the end of the series: Giannis, Dame, Randall, Mitch, OG, Brunson, Hart. They're all injured, and they like barely got over the line to get here. And I just don't find it very impressive. You mentioned like they're so good offensively. I don't know. The offensive rating has been very good, but who are they good against? Like there's no defense left who is defending what they've been doing. And guess what? Boston is going to defend. Like we don't need to have a lot of analysis here to say, okay, Indiana offense good, Boston offense good. Indiana defense not good, Boston defense real good. Like that's the big mismatch here. And now we have to see Halliburton do the thing while he's not necessarily healthy against a real defense and against notably Derek White and Drew Holiday.
Yeah.
And I gotta say, Joe, it could be a rough couple of weeks for our Tyrese Halliburton stock.
Dude, I mean, look, like I love Halliburton. I've got a nice collection of Halliburton rookie cards. Like I have a couple Halliburton autos. Like I love Halliburton. Like I hate him for what he did, like for the Knicks stuff. But at the same time, like I saw a tweet and it was like Halliburton's got like the same energy as like the private school bully that like tells you that you got B's. Like that's what it is. Like I mean, it's like it's corny, but like you wore the Reggie Miller sweatshirt after they won. Like it would be so much more tough. Like if you wore it 2 Game 7, I'm wearing this hoodie. Like I'm gonna put it out there. If we lose, we lose. I'm gonna wear it. Like whatever. Secretly packs it. They win, and then he puts it on. Like but that's like the type of energy here, right? So when you look, like when I'm looking at this series, and I'm like, look, like Boston is like dog walked these teams. Like they are smoking these teams. And like I'm a Boston doubter, I would say. And I think to a degree like you are too, but
Agreed.
like when we look at what Indiana's done and when we look at like what Indiana has kind of put forward, the teams that they beat, and I'm like, we thought they were a good matchup against Milwaukee if Milwaukee was healthy. Like we liked the matchup, period.
Yep.
So we like the number against the Knicks. I mean, like, look, like the Knicks were like a Neesmith or not a Nemard 3, like a prayer from going up 3-0. And then like that series is over. Like you go up 3-0. Like I don't care how many injuries you have. Like the series, you're just going to variance your way to a game. Right. the thing about Indiana that I have concerns about is like, and Matt Moore's talked about this too. He was like the Knicks out try everybody, right? Indiana kind of out tried the Knicks to a degree in Game
Yeah.
7, like down the stretch, whatever. I don't know. Like, even if you out try Boston, I don't know if you have enough talent to just beat Boston because as much as we like shit on Jaylen Brown, like the way Halliburton has played, he's so like wishy washy. Like there were times where we were like saying like, is TJ McConnell better than Halliburton? You cannot have that conversation. There's just no like you cannot have that conversation and think that the Pacers are going to beat the Celtics. Like as much as we hate on Jaylen Brown,
Yeah.
there's never a conversation where you're like, oh, like is Peyton Pritchard better than Jaylen Brown? Like this doesn't happen, you know. So when we look at the matchup, do we think like is this a sweep? Does Indiana get one game? How many games do they push it? Because I don't think they have a chance in this series. Um, how many games do you think they can get?
I mean, I come away sort of feeling like I have the last few series, and sort of like this is where on paper has to also be tied to, well, we've watched Boston do this for 4 years
Yeah,
now at least. And so I can't bet sweep with this team. I can't
no,
do it. I can't ever do it ever again until they actually sweep a team because Boston doesn't show up mentally 4 times in a row and take
one
care of a
game.
team. I'm
There's
sorry,
always
they
one game.
just don't. Like
Yeah,
we have the history. We know what happens. I can't do it. So from that alone, Indiana, I do not think is a top 4 team in the NBA, but they're in the Final Four. They got here. They earned it. But Indiana is definitively, especially as they are right now, better than the corpse of Cleveland and the corpse of Miami, both of whom took a game off Boston. So I'm giving
yeah,
them at least a game. And then I think the biggest advantage, the thing that scares me the most as a Celtics bettor, which I am, is Rick Carlisle and Joe Mazzulla.
yeah.
Now, Rick Carlisle has not really been that awesome in the playoffs compared to I'm not giving it the Spo advantage here. I don't think he's gonna suddenly like crank up the 3 point variance. They're gonna shoot
Sure, yeah.
63s or whatever. Like that's not Indiana's game anyway.
I think a lot of
But
twos
there is
actually.
that,
Yeah,
yeah, and I think too like Indiana's offense is so good and Boston's offense is so wishy-washy, even though it's good because they shoot so many threes, that I do think there is just a decent amount of variance baked into the series where like the Pacers are going to score some points. Even though I think Boston will defend them well, the Pacers are still they're going to score more than the leftover Cleveland and Miami teams did. They're going to at least have a chance to win a game because of the offense. And so like here are the ways where Pacers can win games to me. They are the Pacers want to get twos. Like you know how I'm with the 2 pointers. That's what
yeah,
they were just cleaning up against New York in the last few games. I don't think they're going to get twos here. I think Boston is number 2 2 point percentage defense. Granted, some of that I think is Porzingis, of
yeah.
course,
Me too.
but I don't think they're getting that. And a
Horford's a
lot of
good
the twos
fill-in
they're
though too.
getting,
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. A lot of the twos they're getting is Halliburton and McConnell creating easy stuff for the teammates, which I think is going to be a problem when you got Derek White and Drew Holiday hounding you the entire series. So I don't
yeah,
know that there's that, but Boston is number one, or sorry, Boston is number one in the NBA in 3 point attempts. The Pacers allow the fewest 3 point attempts, so that's weird. And at first I was like, oh, okay, it's strategy. Yeah, I don't know. I've watched a lot of Pacers. I sort of think they just don't need to shoot threes because it's a layup line every time. Like, I don't know that that's like a defensive strategy happening. But the reason why I can see Indiana getting a second game is because I don't trust Boston to not do the thing we've seen them do and settle for twos, the thing Indiana's defense is baiting them into, but settle for bad twos, like the Tatum and the Brown ISO twos, the pull-ups, the mid-ranges, and now you don't hit some of those, and now the Pacers are going to score some points, and so maybe you get that. I think, too, a thing that surprised me about the Knicks series, I thought Indiana would struggle early in the series to adjust to New York's physicality. The reality, from what I saw as a viewer, is I thought the other way went. I thought New York struggled to adjust to Indiana's pace and their
yeah.
speed and the way they're attacking offensively. And I do think Boston could have a little bit of that, of like, whoa, hold on. You have multiple guys that can dribble and all the guys can shoot. This is not allowed. Cleveland and Miami don't have that. What's happening? You're not allowed to have offense. Like, I do think there could be some adjustment there at the beginning. So I don't see Boston getting to 3-0. I think the Pacers get one of those games early. And we know, to give Boston credit, they blow a game, then they get the next game. Like, they always get the bounce back spot. You want to bet them there.
Yeah.
So I think they get a game. I think they can get 2 games. I don't know that they will. I don't really want to know that they will. So my bet for the series is my favorite from last round. I'm running it back, Joe. Celtics -1.5 on the series. All you got to do is win in 6 or less. It's a set it and forget it. It is -340 juiced, and I don't care. I bet it at -390 last time, and I didn't watch 1 second of it, and I started using my money to go out to dinner with friends. It's a 26% ROI on that one. This one's 29%. You take your first amount, you roll it over to this amount, and you're at 63% ROI on a month of Celtics playing nobody, getting you to the next round. All it has to do is not go to game 7 and Celtics win. I just don't I don't know, man. Like barring Tatum or like a major injury on top of Porzingis, which that's honestly the way that this goes awry. But
honestly, even then,
I feel like even the Celtics are fine.
Even then, right? Like, even then, my thing is, and I agree. So this is my question to you: would you rather bet Boston minus, what is it, 1.5?
-1.5 at -340.
Okay. Would you rather bet Boston -1.5 and -340, or Indiana +3.5 at -350? It's almost the same bet. So it's gross either way because it's a lot of juice. Like, are you more confident that Boston wins in fewer than 6? Or no? Yeah, in fewer
6 or fewer.
In 6 or fewer, or that Indiana wins 1?
I am more confident that Boston wins in 6 or less, but I think it's a fair question. Like, that's why, because otherwise I would bet Boston in 5 or 6, like my little combo that I like to do, and exclude the sweep, because I don't want it. I don't want the sweep. I don't think it's happening. No. But on paper, this is a sweep. On paper, Boston should be sweeping them, and so like, I don't want to bet the sweep because I'm sick of it, and I don't need that stress in my life for a week of Celtics games that I don't think really matter that much. But also, I don't really want to bet against it. Like, that doesn't seem like the right bet to me, even though like it's a bet on Boston screwing around, which I don't know. Maybe that's just not analytical. That's not the way that I bet. Like, I'm baking that in, and like, frankly, I sacrificed profit last round. What would I have actually thought would have happened? I actually would have thought Boston -2.5 and they get it in 5 or less. That's what I would have actually thought would happen. And I should have been able to play it that way and get more juice, get more money for my juice. Sure. I didn't. I sacrificed it. And you know what? My life is better for it because I gave up a little bit of profits and I just
Game 5 was close
to it, and I just sweat it all.
Yeah, Game 5 was close.
It was. And with nobody is playing. Like, the entire Cleveland team is in the hospital. So, okay, let me ask back to you. Because so my best bet is that Celtics -1.5 on the series. Now, if you've heard me on the podcast here before, you know I'm like the +1,000 best bet guy, not the -340 best bet guy.
Yeah.
But for this series, I have 2 other alternatives to this. And I think one of them is actually a better bet than the one I'm making, but I just don't feel like making it. So I'm going to let you try to talk me into it. So here's the first one. There's the classic Celtics game 1 plus series angle. That's -320. So that, again, is very similar to the 2 that we... What's that?
It came down a little bit. It was -400.
Yeah. Well, it depends on which book you're looking at, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So, we got Pacers on short rest. You got game 1 coming off of game 7. We know those trends. We know how that goes. I'm sure you'll talk about that on your game 1 podcast. So you get game 1. Now you only... Why I didn't choose this one is because if I'm right about Celtics in 6 or less, and the Celtics win game 1, which I would need for this other bet anyway...
More likely.
Yeah. I'm closer. And I only need 3 out of my next 5 anyhow.
Yeah.
So to me, if the entire point of my -1.5 bet is I don't want to be stuck caring about any single game because you never know when the Celtics don't show up, then I don't want game one to be like, maybe they're listening to our podcast too, and they're like, these guys, get them out of here. I'm
Yeah.
not showing up for game one.
Yeah, and my thing too is like I agree with you because I was looking at those like Celtics 2-1 after 3, right? But the
Yeah.
problem with that is I think game one to me is like a certainty that Boston wins. Like I feel very certain that Boston wins game one. So now I'm saying, does Indiana win game 2 or 3? And like the price isn't right then because you're looking at like the number is like +210, and I'm like for Indiana to get
No,
one,
it's
but like
plus
in
110.
or
It's
plus
plus
one.
110
Oh,
because I looked at this
oh,
one.
so it's not. So it's even worse. Yeah. So it's like you're basically saying like +110 for Indiana to get one of the first 3. When in my brain, they're not winning
It's
game
one
one.
of the second and third.
Yeah, because like when I looked at the series, if it was New York against Boston, I thought New York actually would have had a decent chance if healthy, like with OG Brunson, whatever. I thought New York actually would have had a good chance against Boston in game one, based on the physicality, based on who they've had to play, and just saying like
Yeah.
we're gonna hit you with a bat, like in the knee in game one, and like Indiana doesn't have like they won these series, like props to them. They do not have that level of like moxie to them, in my opinion, for like a game one upset, especially off of a game 7. I don't think that like the culture shock is enough, right?
Yeah.
I do think that for the series overall, I think you're right. Like Indiana does have like a little bit of like gumption. Like I think they have like a little bit to them that they can get a little bit there. But at the same time, like you said, on paper, like this is not a close series. Like when you go down the list of like the best players in the series, like like Halliburton has to be one for Indiana to have a chance. And
Yeah.
Halliburton, like as much as we shit on Tatum, as much as we shit on Brown, as much as like we shit on Porzingis to a degree, that's like not easy to be better than all of them. Like
Yeah,
especially
and not in a
especially Tatum.
vacuum.
Yeah,
Better, yeah, better than those guys with Drew Holiday and Derek White defending you in the series.
yeah. Like Halliburton needs to be the guy that he was when he was being defended by Alec Burks, not Drew Holiday, not Derek White. And that's an ask because those guys, like even if Drew is like a little bit slower as a point of attack guy, even if Derek White's not like necessarily like number one elite, like he's not a Jaden McDaniels, right? But at the same
Yeah.
time, like these dudes, like the team defense is so good, and I mean, like Indiana, they found a little bit of success later in the series because they started sending doubles at Brunson, who was hurt, and then they started sending doubles at Brunson with like Neesmith, Nemhard, even a little bit of Halliburton, like whatever. They were sending doubles. You cannot double the Boston Celtics. I don't know how you do it, right? How do you
Yeah.
do it functionally? Because it's like oh nice, you're gonna double Tatum. Well, you're gonna have Jaylen Brown probably score 40 because you have multiple guys on the team that are willing to shoot the ball 20 plus times a game, which is not something that you've seen in these prior matchups for them. Um, when you're looking at this series and you're looking at like neither team necessarily has like a great rebounder. Neither team necessarily, like obviously you have Halliburton
Yeah.
for the Pacers in terms of the assisting, but Indiana doesn't necessarily have like a number one scoring option. Boston doesn't necessarily have like a number one rebounding option. When you're looking at this and you're looking at some of these player props for the course of the series, is there any way that you're like leaning, or is there anything that you think like is there a player that you're going to say like is this player going to particularly shine in this matchup? I know like one player, like I like Jaylen Brown a lot, and I can get into that, but like I kind of want to see what you think, because like if you like
Yeah.
Jaylen Brown, then all holds off. Like I know, but
Yeah. Well, so I mean, it's no secret that Indiana does not have wing players to match up with Tatum and Brown. Like they're just
yeah,
going to get anything that they want in the series, both of them. And
yeah,
so I always do like my process is I always like do my entire process first before I look at any prices because I want to know what I think before books tell me what they think I think. And so my takeaway was okay. Well, the Celtics -1.5 bet. It's kind of boring, heavily juiced. All right, here's the what I'm in on. I gotta give me some Jason Tatum. Jason Tatum points,
Yeah,
rebounds. Give me the Tatum rebounds. That's what I
yeah,
want. Like
I wanted
I know that's a Joe classic. Every
I
series
wanted that.
bet, his rebounds go up every like in the playoffs. It's always up a couple of rebounds. And so in the season, four games against Indiana, he sat one out, but they had an extra in season tournament game.
Yeah,
Tatum's average 32 and a half points, 11 rebounds, 6.8 assists. Like he is putting up, what is that? That's 50 PRA basically per game.
monster numbers. Yeah,
Yeah, just huge numbers. So I was like, yeah, okay, well, I'm ready. Well, guess what? The books were ready too, because I see a book out right now has Jason Tatum to lead in points minus 500 and Jason Tatum to lead in rebounds minus 500. So I was
it's
like,
ridiculous.
all right, well, can't do that. Especially, I was like, oh, I especially like the Tatum rebound angle because I don't know how much Porzingis will play if he
Yeah.
plays at all. If I was Boston, I ain't touching Porzingis. Rest
You
up,
don't need
buddy.
to. You don't
Maybe
need
I
to.
give you like, yeah, like I think if anything, I'd like to give him like maybe 2 games off the bench to close out the series. Get a little rust off of you and
Yeah, get
like I don't
warm.
want
Yeah,
you starting out of bubble wrap in game 1 in the finals. So like get that out of your system. So I was ready for that. There is an over 9.9 rebounds, just like the minus 115.
it's a little steep
That
for
seems
me.
like a good number, but like I don't know if I need it, right?
Yeah, I
So
didn't like. I didn't like it.
here's the Tatum angle, because this is actually the other bet that I think is the better bet than my Celtics series bet. Isn't Tatum just like a lock to win MVP for the series? It's minus 210 at one book, and the Celtics are minus 1200 to win the series. But if we know that the Celtics are winning, we're
Yeah,
basically giving you that with the odds. And we know that Tatum is leading in scoring because he's minus 500. And we know that Tatum is leading in rebounds because he's minus 500 for that. If you are the leading scorer and rebounder, averaging like 50 PRA for the winning team, you're the MVP. Like, that's it. That's how
it's
this goes.
over.
The MVP
Yeah,
always goes to the winning scorer. So, shouldn't I just be betting at minus 210 the Tatum bet, especially, Joe, because just in case it gets to game 7, now I still get Boston at home. Tatum probably needed to get a big game to get the bet. My real bet, minus 1.5, I'm out. I lost. My bet is
yeah.
gone. My Tatum bet can still cash. So I get an extra out of a game 7, and I'm doing less juice at minus 210. Now, here's the problem. You're about to talk about Jaylen Brown. What if Jaylen has a huge series? What if Derek White shoots 60% on threes again?
Yeah.
What if the voters are just stupid and we get like, what, 9 voters and some stupid weird thing happens in the closeout? Like, oh, look at this story. Let's give it to that guy.
Yeah.
So, again, for my interest of not being interested in the series, I'm just taking the freebie on the minus 1.5. But if you are following, I think the Tatum bet might actually be the better angle than the Celtics 1.5. What do you think about Tatum MVP here?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Tatum MVP makes almost too much sense because he like look, we talk like we always are like, is Tatum the best player? Can he be the best player on a championship team? Can he be this? Can he be that? Tatum is still I think Tatum is still a top 10 player in the NBA. Like just based on what he can do across the board. Offense, defense, passing, assisting, getting his own shot, like whatever. And he's on the best team in the league. Minus 210, I think, is mispriced relative to the price for the series. I think it's absolutely mispriced. Um, I like Jaylen Brown in large part. It's funny because Vince Carter was talking about this 2 nights ago on the TNT show, and he was like, "It's interesting because he was like Tatum." He was like, "I'm nervous about." He was actually nervous about Tatum, which is funny because Tatum's actually scored 30 points or more in every game against the Pacers over the last 2 seasons. So there's that. But he was like, "I'm nervous about Tatum because Tatum gets like." He slows down the offense sometimes. Like he gets like stuck in his own shit, basically. And he was like, I'm not worried about Jaylen Brown. I've never heard an analyst say this ever in my life. But he was like, I'm not worried about Jaylen Brown because Jaylen Brown for lack of a better word, he was like, he doesn't give a fuck. Like Jaylen Brown's like, I'm going to get my bucket. I don't care. I'm attacking the rim. And it's funny because like when you watch Boston, that's actually kind of like what you see, right? Like Tatum like
Yeah.
does a little bit of everything. He does try to incorporate his teammates, Brown is not like Brown doesn't give a shit if anybody else touches the ball. Brown's like, give me the ball, I'm scoring. Like I have a lane to the basket. And it's funny because like when you watch even like the All-Star game, the only person shooting layups is Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown's like, I just want to score. Like, and that's part of why I like Jaylen Brown because I think in this matchup where you have a team like Indiana, we saw them start to double a bit in the last series against Jalen Brunson, but that was really in large part because the Knicks had nobody else. You can't double Boston. Like Jaylen Brown is going to like beat you off bounce. He's going to beat you off the dribble. Like he's going to like not have the number one assignment. Like he's not going to have Neesmith. He's going to have Nemhard, who he's bigger than, faster than, stronger than. And I like that's my one concern is that I think that Jaylen Brown is going to get the secondary matchup and dominate the series. So like his points prop for the series is 24 and a half. I like the over on that. I think that it's too low. He's averaged 28.4 against the Pacers this season. One game was without Tatum where he scored 40, so it's a little bit skewed. But at the same time, like I just think that the number is just I think it's too low. I like him in game one to go over 30 and a half points plus rebounds. I think that's also too low. Just given like what he can kind of bring to the table, like from both sides, you know? So I like Jaylen Brown, but I think at the end of the day, it becomes then it's a politics question. It's like, are they really going to give it to somebody? Like if Tatum and Brown play the same, are they really giving it to Brown? Probably not. And I think that because Porzingis is hurt, we're not going to see him for every game. He immediately comes out. But that also takes away from like a guy like Al Horford. Like let's say Al Horford had a crazy couple games. Like if Porzingis comes back at all, Horford's done. It's the bet's a wash. Yeah. So it's like Drew Holiday doesn't put up enough. And honestly, like Derek White, as good as he can be, as many threes he can hit, like if he's cooking for a whole series, you think that Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are cooking too? Like I just think it's unrealistic. So that's kind of my take on what I think for like MVP for the series.
Yeah, I think too. You can help me with this because you play. I know like some of the first quarter point lines. So I don't. So I don't have the data on this, but I'm guessing that you're gonna know. My sense from watching when I once watched Celtics games, I remember when I watched Celtics games. I remember when that happened before. I feel like Jaylen Brown tends to attack early in games. Like I feel like he goes and gets his buckets in the first quarter, and he attacks early in the shot clock and in like semi-transition, which is going to be a lot of against Indiana. There aren't going to be a lot of long possessions against Indiana. Like you're going to be moving and getting your shots up. And so if that's true, and if we are right that this is a fast and quick series, let's call it a 5-game series perhaps, more variance that way, and aren't there possibly games where we're into garbage time by the fourth quarter and we don't need the Tatum closeout points that aren't happening anymore? We got the early Jaylen points when he was getting to the stuff in the first quarter, getting into the action early. Does that maybe help your case a little bit more? Well, I know you like to play Tatum first quarter points, but am I right about the Jaylen Brown early on thing?
So it's been interesting because without Porzingis, the rotations kind of swing, right? So Brown doesn't play the whole first quarter. Tatum does. And that's why I like the Tatum first quarter points angle. So like I'm going to be on 7.5 again. He's hit that in 11 of 12 games this season when playing the full first quarter, which he has done every playoff game without Porzingis. He's missed it one game. He missed the last game against the Cavaliers. Doesn't matter. 7.5 is just too low. So I'm going to be taking that Tatum angle. I do think because the other thing that I like is like because of that rotation, Brown gets like I know we talked about Indiana's bench has been really good. Indiana's bench is not that good. Like they just have played the Knicks like bench's bench. So like when we look at this, like Brown's going to get those minutes, and I think he's going to smash. So I think this is a really good opportunity for Jaylen Brown and for Jason Tatum. I think just based on the way the rotations kind of are going. So I mean, one of the things like that I normally like to bet, and like I feel like the market's been like way sharper this season has been the series leader markets, like whether it's points, rebounds, assists, whatever. I feel like they've been like much tighter. And honestly, like I'm not seeing like a ton of value in this Celtics Pacers series. And I think because like you have such stark like differences, right? Like you have the like you have a Tatum, who should definitely, who should realistically probably lead in scoring. I think Brown is maybe worth like a look at like plus 500, plus 600. Rebounds, Tatum is like a solid favorite. Assists, you have Halliburton, who's a significant favorite. Um, did you see anything that you're like, maybe this is worth a sprinkle in this series? Because like I really struggled to find something in this particular series, just based on the way the players kind of are for Boston, Indiana.
Yeah, I don't see much. I think basically I agree with your takes. I agree with the book's takes on who the big leaders are. So to me, it's like, okay, that's who I'd like to play, but I'm not playing it at the price. But, okay, Derek White drops 37 in game one because he hit 9 threes, and like Tatum only scores 22. They're going to have to price that in. So now maybe I get a better Tatum price. Now I can go for it. Or like
Yeah.
say, Tatum rebounds, Halliburton assists. Like those are the guys. 3 pointers, I'm always looking at 3 pointers because that's just variance and weirdness. Like I don't have a bet for it right now, but that would be the market that I'd watch closest in this one. But I
Yeah.
think just like there's value in waiting for like the post game one or game two to jump on the favorite. Though in this series, even that I'd want to be careful because we might only get 4 games, 5 games, and you might not close that ground too.
Yeah, and I think that's I think that's an important point, right? Because if you're expecting a longer series, a lot of times if you want to buy back in on the favorite, the variance plays out. And you're like, you got the favorite and you're like, look, like I got a better price. It was only one game. They had one bad game, like whatever. They still should be the favorite, or they still should be priced as such. When you get a shorter series, it kind of adds a little bit to that variance where you're just like, maybe not. Like maybe they're just gonna suck. Like maybe that's just what it is. Like maybe this is just a bad matchup for them. And it makes me like want to play somebody in this Boston Indiana series, like in particular. Like I'm looking at it, and I'm like, do I want Tatum assist leader at 6-1? And I'm just like, I just can't really get there because Halliburton, as wishy washy as he can be with the assists, like his floor is 6, like almost
Yeah.
like in every game. Like his floor is 6. Tatum's like ceiling is like 10, and like Halliburton can get that a lot of times in his sleep. So that's definitely my concern with like some of these types of markets. And it's something that you definitely want to keep an eye on though, because DraftKings did leave open, the all the books kind of left open the leader markets, but DraftKings left open the points per game, assists per game, rebounds per game, threes per game markets after games 1, 2, sometimes even 3. That's, I think, where you can kind of capitalize on somebody going like scorching hot or being really cold, because you can kind of determine whether or not it's like a matchup thing, or if it's just like they're just running a little cold or they're running a little hot right now. So I think those are a couple things that you can kind of look at. But that does take us to the Western Conference. The Western Conference matchup, I think, is fascinating. A lot of us had Denver penciled into the finals, realistically. Like we were like, Denver's really good. They're the champs, what have you. Brandon's Wolves, my Wolves, however you want to call it. NBA Brazil Wolves. They were sacrificed for this run. And look, we have the Minnesota Timberwolves versus the Dallas Mavericks. This is a really exciting series. Two teams that kind of went all in, realistically. Like when you really look at it, like you had two teams that sold out. Like Dallas made a ton of moves at the trade deadline that a lot of people looked at and you're like, that ain't it. Like that, no way. Like that was not the move to make. But it worked out, bring in Daniel Gafford, bring in PJ Washington, etc. And then you look at Minnesota, they have like $250 million tied up in bigs, like for like like almost per season. When you look at this matchup, bias aside, and I know that your bias actually might lead you away from the Wolves just because of the way that you like hate yourself sometimes with your fandom. But when you look at this series, what is the key for Dallas to win, and what's the key for Minnesota to win? Because this does feel like a very nuanced series. It's not one that I think a lot of people really would have expected going into the season.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's not one I expected. It's not one that I had to really put a lot of thought into before sitting down to prep for this series, which is kind of
Yeah.
exciting because then it's new. But it's also like, okay, shoot. So where do we start here? And where I usually would start is, okay, let's look at the season series. How did this go in season? What have I learned? Learned nothing. I learned
Nothing.
nothing from the season series. All 4 games happened before the end of January. Kyrie missed 2 of them. One of them, like the entirety of Dallas missed. So that's just 2 games
Not
basically
just nothing.
completely off.
Yeah.
Yeah, just almost nothing, almost no value. To me, looking at like when Minnesota has the ball, when Dallas has the ball, what are the 4 factors? Like the big picture thing that I like to start with. My big takeaway is I think both defenses have the advantage in the matchup. And I think that that probably is going to make a very we're used to seeing like this the beautiful game of basketball in the West and then the grindy basketball in the East, and I think we're getting the exact opposite
Yeah.
this round. Like we're gonna get like 140 to 132 game out in the East, and then we're gonna get the very next night like 85-78 in one of these games or
Yeah.
something. We're just like, the shots weren't falling, and like the defenses are really good. I don't know. As I prepped for Dallas for the playoffs, I was like, okay, their defense got really good with Gafford, and they put Derek Jones into the lineup. And
He's been great.
does that
Yeah.
pass the smell test? Like the numbers were good. The EFG
It's,
defensively for them, which is one of the most important stats, jumped from like bottom 5 to top 3 suddenly over the last like 20 game stretch. And it just, to me, that smelled fishy. And quite frankly, based on what I have seen so far, I've watched pretty much all their games in the playoffs. I don't still watch, like, I watch Minnesota. That is a nasty defense. That is like, I see it. I see the
yeah.
rotations. I see the rim protection. I see the whole thing. I watch Dallas. It's clearly a good defense. I like that Kyrie and Luka are engaged. I don't see this like, oh my goodness defense. I don't see the crazy rim protection, the crazy EFG. And I find myself, and I don't know if this is like, this feels like bad process, but I find myself leaving 2 Dallas series so far being like, man, the Clippers really didn't play well in that series. Man, the Thunder young players really didn't show up in that series. And maybe that's not fair. Maybe it's time to give the Mavericks defense credit for those teams and players not showing up. So I kind of am here. And so then the question to me is, okay, if both defenses have the advantage, who gets the offense? And now here's where I'm scared as a Wolves fan. I'm just going to tell you right now, I will be betting this very lately. Like, I don't have a strong take on the series, and I don't have a strong position. And, like, the second time in my life, the Timberwolves possibly have a real chance to do an actual thing. I just want to be a fan. So I'm going to evaluate because it's our job to evaluate. But here's where I get stuck and a little scared, the fan part of me. If it's all defense, now it comes down to like the guys that Jim Turvey likes, the bucket getters, right? Like the guys that just got to go get you something when it's all slogged up. And I know how good Ant has been, and I got to give him credit. I know how good Karl Anthony Towns has been in some of the biggest games this postseason. Finally, my guy. But if it's all defense, and I get Ant and Cat, and they get Luka and Kyrie, I know Kyrie hasn't been that great. Luka has been hampered by injury. His shooting percentages are all down. I know Ant's got next and the MJ meme and all that stuff. I don't know if the favorite team doesn't have Luka and Kyrie and the other. I get stuck on that. And I was like, what? Okay, here's my question for you. We do the player ranking hierarchy thing for this series right now, given the health, given everything where we're at. Where is Ant in the hierarchy? Is he first, second, or third? And which tier player is he in with?
He's definitely not first because Luka is still, in my opinion, head and shoulders better than everybody else in the series. Hurt or not, the dude is a freak. That he came in third in MVP voting. Whether he should have even been third, if not second, if not first, is a different question, right? Ant, I think, is in a different tier. I think Ant is 2, but I think it's closer than people would want to think. I think Kyrie Irving is right there. Kyrie's a monster. And then honestly, if we were really getting into it, you got like Rudy Gobert could be third, like just based on what he brings defensively. I know people hate that take because they're like, oh, like he is shooting 100% on fadeaways, contested fadeaways in the fourth quarter of Game Sevens. But like at the same time, like what he brings to the table defensively is so important. Luka to me is in a different tier of every player in this series. Like I think that Luka is in contention for best player in the world. Period. Like Ant is amazing. I love Ant. I think he's a savage. But at the same time, I don't have him there. Like we're talking about Luka as like best player in the world. We're talking about Ant is like, is he top 15? Is he top 10? Right? Like, is he like what level of all NBA is he? Whereas Luka, it's
Right.
like not only is he like in MVP conversation, it's like MVP is a voting thing, whatever. Like, is he best player in the world? That's where I have this like tiered kind of like. So I think that there is like I think there's a sizable gap. But at the same time, I don't know how healthy Luka is, and I think that maybe
Yeah.
like that definitely narrows the margin a bit, because of like Ant's engine, what he brings on the defensive side of the ball. But to me, the best player in the series, I think you could argue, I think best player in the playoffs is Luka Doncic at this point. At this point in time.
Yeah, I think so, and that's where I felt as I kind of went through this. I didn't see a big advantage for either offense. I didn't see a big advantage for either team, and it's like, okay, I think Minnesota's defense is clearly the better defense of the two, but also Dallas's offense is clearly the better offense of the two, and it feels very even. And now here's where I've gone in the last two Dallas series that I have picked incorrectly. I picked Clippers in 6 or 7. My main bet was I think this series goes long. I am giving Luka credit for getting us to at least a
Yeah,
game 6. But now that we're there, I don't want the over 5.5 because it was like minus 180. I don't want to do the minus 180. Apparently, I do that now, but I did not do that then. So I was like, okay, I can't do that. Okay, well, what are my options? I got Clippers in 6, Clippers in 7, Mavs 6, Mavs 7. Well, I like the Clippers a little bit better. They had Kawhi healthy at the time, I thought,
yeah,
and they would have a home game 7. So I was like, okay, tiebreaker goes the Clippers. I'll play Clippers 6 or 7. Didn't work. Get to the next round. Same read. I'm giving Luka credit. I'm seeing the teams relatively equal based on the analysis. Oklahoma City's got Shea. He's better than Luka, who is not healthy at the time. And Oklahoma City gets game 7 at home. Give me the over 5.5
yeah,
skewed toward the better team and the team that gets game 7 at home. Here's the problem. Now we get to Minnesota, and I think Minnesota, I probably feel slightly better on the coin flip scale to Dallas, but I still like the over 5.5. I still feel the series goes long, but I no longer feel confident that I get the best player in the series. I would like to. I'd like to believe that's Ant, but I don't think it is yet, and I don't know if it's that close for the reasons you just said. And I do get home game 7, but I also get home game 1 coming off of game 7, and I might be throwing away the advantage of the home court
yeah,
right off the bat. And so I hate to do this, but I think that the best value on the series, if you're looking to play a team or a side,
yeah.
is Mavs in 6 or 7. I think that's where the value is on this series.
Yeah, and I was looking at that. I was also looking at Luka, Western Conference Finals MVP, just based on the fact that like I don't see a scenario where the odds shouldn't be the same. Like I cannot fathom a scenario
Agreed.
where Dallas wins the series because Luka isn't the best player in the series. Like I cannot see it, and the odds aren't indicative of that. Like there's like a 25-cent jump to get Luka as Western Conference Finals MVP. We're there, like we talk about this is it's like our great white whale, the losing player, like the player on the losing team wins the finals MVP, like whatever. It just doesn't happen. It's not a thing, right? Like I and it like at the end of
Yeah.
the day,
And if
if
it did
LeBron
happen, it would be if it did happen, it'd be Luka on the losing team when
yes,
Minnesota won. He could be the one
exactly.
doing it.
Luka would be the one doing it because he's the guy that's like he's not LeBron because he doesn't have any defense, but like at the same time, like he's the guy that's closest in terms of like what are the stats that I'm putting up? Are they like are they LeBron esque? Where it's like I'm dominating, I'm winning, I'm leading in every single category, and my team still lost. Like there's only so much I can do. Like I have nothing else to give. And if LeBron didn't do it, and they're not giving Luka MVPs, period,
Yeah.
he's not getting it. Like he still hasn't hit that threshold. I think if Luka had won a title, maybe then you get there. But also, I don't think that Minnesota is like that type of juggernaut where you give it to a player on the losing team. Like it was one
Yeah.
thing, like the conversation was there when LeBron lost to a Golden State Warriors team who was like a dynasty team. Like it was like this team is far and away the best team in the league. It's like not even close. Like maybe LeBron could get it. And he still didn't get it. And he was putting up like 40, 10, and 10. So it's like, you know, if he wasn't doing it, nobody's doing it. But that's kind of where I was thinking, like, if you get a little bit of value with Luka, I think he's like plus 185 to win Western Conference Finals MVP. When I look at the series, I have a couple questions about it. And the biggest thing is, like Ant said in his interview, which is so funny, he's like, I'm going to guard Kyrie. And it's like, well, didn't have to tell us that. Like you didn't have to say it. Like, but you know, so he's gonna guard Kyrie. I like honestly, like I have no reason to think that he's gonna lie about that either. Like he probably is gonna guard Kyrie. That puts McDaniels on Luka.
Yeah.
I don't like that. I don't like that if I'm Minnesota. Like that he is not big enough. Do you think this is a series where Minnesota is basically going to say like, look, we're going to stop. We're going to stop Kyrie. We're going to stop PJ Washington. We're going to stop Daniel Gafford. Like Luka, you and your inefficient ass, like you beat us with your 35% shooting percentages. Do you think that that's what the series is going to come down to? And it's going to be like, can you beat us, Luka? Like, can you shoot 50% from the field, 40% from three, and beat us?
I do wonder that, I think you and I texted about this last round that would have been my strategy as Oklahoma City is to say, okay, we got all these great defenders. Let's take away Kyrie. Let's take away all the other guys. And again, going in, Luka was really looking banged up. He's looking a little healthier now and got a little bit of extra rest now. So I am kind of pricing in that I think we're going to see maybe the best version of Luka that we've seen in the playoffs this round. Like I think we're moving in the right direction with him. Maybe I don't know if health goes that way, but it seems like what I'm seeing
plays himself
right now.
into shape.
Right. So I like if you look at the matchups. Okay, so Rudy's going to defend the center and vice versa. Cat's going to be on PJ and vice versa. Like that's pretty easy stuff.
Yeah.
And then here's how I have it: is I got Ant on Kyrie, McDaniels on Luka, and then you had Conley on Derek Jones Jr. Like that. That seems like the only real logical way you're going to play the starters. And then, okay, like the Timberwolves don't have someone to guard Luka. Like you don't want really Cat doing. You don't want him to get like foul trouble and he goes out.
No,
it can't be Ant. It can't just be Ant the entire game. It's obviously not Conley. Nickeil Alexander-Walker is even smaller than Jaden McDaniels. So you're just going to take turns trying. So I do think it makes sense to say, okay, let's try. Like at least like Ant's been a really, really good defender. That's the thing where his value offensively is starting to slip a little bit. But like that dude locks in on defense and takes pride in it. And I think him on Kyrie and the somewhat limited Kyrie that we've seen so far, like I think you could, like between him, McDaniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, like I think they can kind of take Kyrie mostly out of it and put it on Luka. That makes sense to me. However, if you flip it around, I think that's basically what Dallas is going to do too. And Dallas doesn't have quite the same guys, but I think Dallas is going to say, okay, we're going to put Kyrie on Conley. We're going to put Luka on Jaden, hide him over there, put the bigs on the bigs. Derek Jones, you got Ant. And when it's not you, Josh Green, you got Ant.
Good luck.
And like those are good defenders.
Yeah.
Like, good luck, but those are good defenders. And like, again, to my fandom and to my bet, do I want to bet on Ant one-on-one against Luka one-on-one for a whole series? Like that's kind of where I feel like this might be heading. I don't think I want that. I don't think I want that juice. Like I love Ant. I want to watch it, Maybe. I don't know. That doesn't sound like a lot of fun. I like to watch good basketball, but
Yeah.
like I like to watch the trash talking that happens in that matchup. But I don't feel good as a Minnesota backer if I got to play Ant 1-on-5 versus Luka 1-on-5. Like I want the better player, and the better player is Luka.
Yeah, you know what's funny? I actually think I've been thinking about this series more. I feel like actually Minnesota's best defensive option against Luca is Nas Reed because he's big, he's fast enough. I know he's physical, but like I'm concerned that
Huh.
number one's gonna foul a lot. But I like that like it's funny because it's like impossible to put him on the floor because it's like how do you keep Nas Reed on the floor? And that means you're taking out
Yeah.
Cat or you're taking out Rudy. And Rudy has like a monster plus matchup. Like Rudy should like dominate on the glass. Like I bet in the app I logged it. It opened at 11 and a half rebounds. That is way too low. It like he is going to like in game 1 in particular, teams kind of play what they want to play. Rudy's going to smash on the glass. Like I don't see a scenario where he goes under that line, but like I think that they try to do this the way that they want to in game 1. I think moving forward, I'm interested in seeing a little bit of Nas on Luca just because of the size. Like that's my concern with McDaniels. It's my concern with Nikhil Alexander Walker because Luca's not a fast. He's not a fast dude. Like he's not. He's not
Yeah.
blowing by you. Like he's gonna out finesse you. And I think maybe you do need maybe you just need a body like that's like a big body that you can put on him that's like fast enough, like enough, can block, can do a little bit, like can kind of give it back. It actually to me is a concern for Rudy stuff on the series as much as I think it's a plus matchup for Rudy because I think you need Towns's offense and what he does like stretching the floor
Yes.
because like you just can't win this series with only Ant scoring. Like they don't have enough otherwise.
Yep.
So it's like I know Nas is a good scorer. I'm a little concerned about Rudy stuff so that like I almost want to play and like but I don't want to play it yet because Luka's like 11-1 to lead in rebounds. And I think
Yeah.
Rudy should crush as long as he's in. But at the same time, like I don't want to say that Rudy could get played off. Defensive Player of the Year, we've seen him go through like multiple rotations, like multiple different like schemes against him. But I think that might be the player that I like if I was Minnesota, I would say like let's try this. Like let's see what happens when we throw like a slower guy but a bigger guy at Luka for like a full game.
Yeah, that's interesting. I can't say I've imagined a world where we'd get to the cusp of the finals and Nas Reed is my Luca stopper.
Yeah,
I've never before imagined this world. I will add this to your case though. I also had penciled Luca at 11-1 rebounding as like, okay, this looks playable potentially. I think this is one that because of what you said, I think you wait maybe you might even
yeah,
get
you
even
win
better
after game
number
1.
because Rudy
Yeah.
gets like 15 rebounds in game 1. Here's the other reason that it could be a good angle to eventually fade Rudy and maybe like play a rebounds per game under also. I think Maxey comes back sometime this series. And Maxey is a dude that specifically will hurt Rudy Gobert and play him
Yep.
off the court because Rudy literally got played off the court by Maxey Kleber in a playoff series before, if I recall right, because he stretches him out, he pulls him away from the basket, and that's the thing that Rudy is not like. That's just not his strength. That's fine. He still can be awesome and be a 4-time DPOI and not be able to do everything in the books. That's fine, but
Yeah.
it's not a good matchup for him. And even if he doesn't get played off the court, you get him pulled away from the basket to defend, you're not getting the rebounds anymore.
Yeah. And
So I do think that that's an angle to target, especially if you start to hear the whispers of Maxey might be back for game 3
yeah.
or game 5 or something. And back to my angle on the betting as well, I think Maxey really swings the series a little bit if he's available. And so the longer the series goes, and I expect a long series because Luka has played in 7 series and 6 of them have gone 6 games or more. The longer it goes, the better chance Maxey is back. And if Kleber's out there, now I think that that's a matchup advantage that Dallas can offer that gives Minnesota some real issues there. So that's one angle that's not necessarily actionable right now, but it's definitely something I'll be watching as the series goes along.
Yeah, I know like Tim McMahon was talking about Kleba, and he was kind of saying he was like, he's not coming back right away. He's doing like more like fixed shooting type of thing. So he was like, maybe. But I think, but at the end of the day, if it's a long series, all you need is like one or two games where somebody gets played off. And you're like, well, that just
Yeah.
tanked it. Like that, like it totally ruined the whole thing. And at the end, and we know Luka's not going to get played off. So it's an interesting spot. I think it's definitely like you said, it's one that I'm really looking for. But it's kind of like just like a thing that I was like I don't know, like maybe. Um, I think at the end of the day, the one thing that we are both agreeing on in this series, it's going to be a long series. Like I don't see this series being done
Yeah.
in 4 or 5 games. Over 5.5 is like -175.
There's a
Feels
it's minus 160 at DraftKings because that
okay. So
right now that is my best bet on the series. Unless you help talk me into the Mavs in 6 or 7 bet, that I think should be my best bet.
yeah, no, well, that's the thing because I like. Look, I like the over on the series total. I was actually hemming and hawing about a parlay between the over on this series at 5.5 and either like
Hmm.
Indiana +3.5 or Boston like -1.5. Because I think that you're laying a lot of juice in both, but you kind of are getting like then you're getting a plus money number. And it's
Hmm.
like the two things that I have most conviction with is that I think Boston smokes Indiana in one way, shape, or form. But I do think, but I hesitate with the -1.5 because I'm like, I think Indiana gets a game, but I like don't really have like a real reason to think they get a game besides like math, variance, whatever.
Yeah. Right.
Um, Whereas with this series, I'm like, I think that there's a lot of nuance. I think there's a lot of pivots. And I think that this series could go long. So I'm comfortable. I'm pretty comfortable with you like laying the minus, like the -175. I would say though, if you like Dallas in like at all, right? I think you could bet them game one series +300 because of this game seven type of thing where teams off of game sevens generally struggle, right? Alternatively, I think we're generally just assuming we're putting Boston in the finals, right? Because
Right.
if you're not, you're gonna like either of these Western Conference teams against Indiana. Like just that's just the way the market's gonna be. Do you like Dallas against Boston? Because if you do, ish, then rather than say like, well, let me bet them in 6 or 7, maybe just bet Dallas to win the title right now.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that makes sense as a strategy. I don't think it's my strategy because I can't imagine myself liking them against Boston. But having said that, I didn't imagine myself liking them against the Clippers or the Thunder or now the Timberwolves. I don't quite like them, but I do like them to go long. And if you think every series with Luka, if you're giving it to 6 games, then the way that Dallas would be priced as an underdog against Boston, if I think it gets to 6 games, now you're in Dallas for game 6. You get that one. You got the best player in the court and Luka. Now you're
Yeah.
in game 7. And at the very least, you've got options and you've got a very valuable ticket. So it's that's kind of where I'm at on my bet here is truly this is not a Minnesota Timberwolves nihilism thing. I promise. I'm just ready to be a fan and be along for the ride. I think the value in the series is more on the Mavericks, even though I think the Timberwolves are slightly more likely to win the series. So I I don't mind the strategy you're saying on just going forward with the Mavs title position. If you like that, if you think you might sort of like them against Boston, I think that makes sense. Here's why I think I should be making Mavs in 6 or 7 the bet instead of over 5.5 because Mavs in 6 is plus 500. Mavs in 7 is plus 750 if you shop around at the right books and get those. So combine those two, that's basically plus 250. It's 28%
Not bad.
implied.
Yeah.
If I just bet the Mavs to win the series it's plus 142. And if I'm thinking about my over 5.5 bet, to me, I can't get there on the Mavs winning in under 5.5. I
No,
don't see what that world is. Dallas wins game one because of the game seven thing. Minnesota gets game two. Dallas wins both home games, and Dallas wins a closeout in game five. Not impossible, but that's not
a
what
lot.
I see happening.
The big ask.
I
Yeah.
could see I could see losing my over 5.5 because Minnesota won in five. The game one thing doesn't happen. Jason Kidd's 2-7 in game ones. Luka Doncic is 1-6 straight up in his first game of a playoff series lifetime. Not great, my like show up for series. If Minnesota gets game one and then game two, you steal one in Dallas, you come home, you close it out. I could lose my over 5.5 that way to Minnesota. But if I don't think Dallas in 5 or 4 is a possibility, if I take those out of my equation, now Dallas plus 252 at 28%. If I think that's the only real way Dallas can win the series, I absolutely think Dallas could win the series 28% of the time. I think that's the better bet for me than betting the over 5.5 minus 160, 62%. Or maybe it's both. Maybe I treat it as an escalator. I
Yeah.
play sorry, we're on your pod. I'll treat it as a ladder. You hear that? I'm treating it as a ladder on your podcast, Joe. Take the minus 160, get the over 5.5, then maybe put a little bit on the Mavs too. Help me out with my unbelief and my Wolves skepticism. You heard the argument. You know how I am on the math. Does my math and my argument say that I should be picking the Mavs 6 or 7 option rather than the over 5.5?
I think the problem is really like when you're looking at this is that what Minnesota has been able to do defensively and their path through the playoffs, I think, has been much more significant than what Dallas really has had to go through. Like I think that Dallas had to beat the Clippers. Clippers were hurt. They didn't have Kawhi. Dallas had to beat Oklahoma City, who I think we have like significant questions about, and like that's different. That's another podcast about like just how good SGA is, about just what the strategy was for them like over the course of the whole season. And they were getting like preposterous performances from guys like PJ Washington, Derrick Jones Jr., like whatever. They're getting crazy performances. Whereas when you look at what Minnesota had to do, Minnesota has just marched through the playoffs, and then they just came off a game 7 against the reigning champs. I think that they are more battle tested at this point. They've gone through more rotations. They've gone through more iterations. I think that they have a little bit more to them right now, and I think it feels more sustainable because of what the defense can do. At the same time, with Dallas, you're like Luka, like like it's just he's been incredible. But to me, like I think this is closer to a coin flip series. I think that your numbers are right on liking Dallas, but I do question a little bit if it's like a little bit of hedging on your happiness here, where
I
you're just
know.
like, I'm struck because like you and realistically, like it's funny because you've never been in this scenario as a capper where you're just like you just never have your teams there. But I do think that these teams are evenly matched. I think that you can bet the over 5.5 comfortably, and just cash that. And I think that that's okay. I don't think that like for this type of series, like I need to take a side, especially
Yeah,
I'm more interested in Minnesota probably against Boston than I am with Dallas against Minnesota or against Boston. But like
agreed. Same.
either way, like it's a gross finals matchup for these Western Conference teams. So I think that I agree with you. I like the over 5.5. I think that's kind of the way to go. But when you're looking at this series, is there anything else that you like before we get out of here?
Yeah, I got one bomb for you. I got to get this one out of here. Joe Delara, who so far in the playoffs do you think leads these two teams in blocks per game? So out of all
Oh,
the
it's
players in the
somebody
options,
dumb.
who
I
is
already
it?
know. It's got to be somebody dumb. Like it's got to be like Derek Jones or like McDaniel's or
You
like
got it. It's Derrick
yeah.
Jones.
Yeah.
It's Derrick Jones Jr. 1.4 blocks a game, which is a low number. And at some books, I can say books, right? I can name a book
Yes. It
here.
doesn't matter. You can name books. Yeah.
All right, bet 365. You can bet most blocks. Derrick Jones Jr. has at least one block in all but 2 playoff games so far. So 10 out of 12, he has at least one. We're only averaging 1.4. At least one is really good when you're only averaging 1.4 to lead all players. Dallas doesn't get blocked very much. Derrick Jones Jr. had a 3-block game 5 times this season. One of those was against the Timberwolves. Rudy Gobert is only averaging 1.1 blocks. He's the big favorite here. Derrick Jones Jr. is 50-1 to lead in blocks for the series. 50-1, and he is the current leader right now. And this market is literally going to be like who had 8 blocks in the series. Derrick Jones Jr. gets one every game. He's going to be in the mix. It's an absurd number. It's an absurd bet. I can't wait to root for it the entire series.
I can't wait to break your brain even more because for some reason, Bet365 lets you parlay them where you can bet Derrick Jones Jr. most blocks in the series and Derrick Jones Jr. most blocks without Gobert. So you can actually bet this because this is hilarious because he's 22-1 and 50-1. So the odds are, I can't even say this right. It's plus 117200. So basically $1 wins $1 wins $1,137 because
There's no reason we should be able to parlay those. Okay,
you
so
should not
Derrick Jones to lead in blocks, which he will lead Rudy Gobert, and also if he leads in blocks,
yes,
is now 1,130-1 odds.
yeah,
When he is currently the blocks leader. So that's my bomb. Go Derrick Jones, block some shots, and God help me if it comes down to like game 6 or 7, game on the line, and Derrick Jones Jr. blocks Ant, and that's how the series ends, and I cash my bet, and this is how it went. Whatever. At least we got our 1137-1 odds. That's my bet.
that's disgusting. I can't wait to log it. But no, so that was great. Brandon, it's been a long episode. We're gonna skip pods and recs today. We always get them from you. But it was a pleasure having you on. We're excited for the playoffs. We got some plans kind of moving forward for what we want to do. Well, I'm sure we'll have Brandon on moving forward. But Brandon, it's a pleasure having you. And the playoffs are going to be amazing. This episode was obviously once again brought to you by our good friends at Props.cash. You can get that for 25% off your first month with code Delera25. Get the green charts, get the red charts, get the hit rates, get their projections, which is actually really important, especially like if you want to dabble into WNBA. It gives you a little bit of like a basis for what you want, what you think you should be looking at. And that's what's in season right now. So you can get like those projections on Caitlin Clark, on Aaliyah Boston. Like you can get all those things and you get that for 25% off with code Delera25. Brandon, it's a pleasure. Go Wolves to a certain degree, obviously. A woo. And let's continue to cash that.